We need to talk.
Tough luck, kids. The show's canceled.
Hey, welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and The Acolyte has been canceled. Well, kind of. Like many Disney Plus shows, it won't be renewed for a second season, and we're all pretty mixed on this news. Don't get me wrong, The Acolyte had a lot of issues that we were very vocal about on the channel, but it also had a lot of really great moments, story beats, and awesome characters. And I really enjoyed spending time in this era of the Star Wars galaxy, and I was looking forward to seeing the next chapter in the story. A little later, I'm going to bring on my friends Heather Antos and Colton Ogburn to get their thoughts on this cancellation and what it means for the future of Disney Star Wars. So for me, The Acolyte was pretty much the Star Wars version of the Eternals. It had some great ideas, filmed on natural locations with real lighting, had incredible setup, but not really time to deliver on all of its promises. And both projects ended with a cliffhanger that looks like we'll never get to see resolved, at least not on screen. Maybe we'll get a comic book or a novel or something, but I'm going to ask Colton and Heather about that later. And I really think that that's too bad because this show, despite its faults, introduced a lot of really great concepts and fresh new ideas to the Star Wars galaxy. I mean, we got to see a kyber crystal bleed. We learned about the dark side magic and its connection to Anakin and Vergences in the Force. We saw Darth frickin' Plagueis on screen for the first time. And I think they were setting up an awesome origin story for the Knights of Ren from the sequel trilogy, with Chimera being the first Knight of Ren.
Knights of Ren. Ghouls.
I love lore building, and that's exactly what this show is doing. Another thing we loved about it was how it showed us the Jedi hubris and the very steps that it took to lead to the end of the High Republic era, and their ultimate downfall less than a century later. And let me be clear, this idea of Jedi hubris isn't a new concept as some would suggest, referring to Luke's line in The Last Jedi.
The legacy of the Jedi is failure. Hypocrisy, hubris.
George Lucas's intent was always to show the arrogance of the Jedi and how they allowed themselves to become corrupted and complacent in their own power. Yoda says as much in the prequels.
His abilities have made him, well, arrogant.
Yes. A flaw more and more common among Jedi.
I was really looking forward to seeing Master Yoda in Season 2 and his involvement in covering up the events of the Acolyte. Not because he's like a villain, but because he loves and is attached to the Jedi Order and doesn't want to see it fall. And it would be Yoda's own mistake of falling victim to his own attachments, even his attachment to the Order itself, that would help lead to the Order's downfall in the prequels. I mean, come on guys, we all know that Yoda in his solitude on Dagobah likely spent every waking moment feeling guilt for his hand in the fall of the Jedi Order and the Republic, and that's what makes his character and the story overall more interesting. A Season 2 of The Acolyte could have given us the most in-depth look at the character of Yoda we've ever gotten, and as a lifelong Star Wars fan, I'm a little bummed we're not going to get that story. And I know that Colton Ogburn, the guy who's eternally trapped in our TV but doesn't know it, so please don't tell him, is feeling the exact same way when it comes to Plagueis, something I'm going to ask him about here shortly.
Hey, what is that thing? Wait, is that the guy?
Yes, it's him. Dude, what are you saying? We can't understand you.
I think he said, please set me on fire.
No, Doug, that's not what he said. Dude, you're too hairy. You have to take better care of your personal grooming habits. In fact, you know what? I gotcha. There, is that better?
Oh, that's much better, thank you. What is that thing?
Why, this is the Lawnmower 5.0 from Manscaped, the global men's lifestyle brand that is revolutionizing men's grooming and the sponsor of this video. Guys, listen to me. It is summer. This is not the time of year when you can just let yourself go down there. There's a lot of sweat, a lot of tugging, and a lot of pinching, and it's important to keep your body nice, smooth, and groomed. I always struggle with this because most hair trimmers are not built for the sensitive manly areas that we're talking about here. But Manscaped is specifically designed to be the #1 male body trimmer. And especially, look at this limited edition white hot lawnmower trimmer. It's not just a hair trimmer, guys. It's a work of art.
Oh.
But there are limited quantities available in this collar, so you gotta act fast.
Wow, I can't believe you cut my hair with that. I didn't feel a thing.
Hell, that's because it uses next-gen dual skin-safe blade heads, an updated trimmer blade, and an interchangeable foil blade for peak performance. The updated trimmer blade features longer, wider, and rounded teeth that cut through hair with ease. And this foil blade leaves you with a finish that's as sleek and bare as a Kmart parking lot. It's also super easy to switch between blades. It is like having two trimmers in one. The trimmer also comes with an LED light, so you can really see into those dark nether folds, and the new light features a dual temperature function foundation designed to flatter a variety of skin tones. It also features a rechargeable Li-ion battery, RPM technology for top-notch performance, a travel log, USB-C charging, and a comprehensive 3-level battery life indicator. And let's not forget the best part, guys, it's waterproof. Whether you're at the beach or the pool, it's always trimming time. So join the more than 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped for all their grooming needs and get the special edition Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra in white hot while supplies last. Head over to manscaped.com and grab yours now. When you use my promo code, you'll get 20% off plus free international shipping at checkout. That's 20% off plus free shipping when you use the promo code ScreenCrush at manscaped.com. Now back to what I was saying. So all of this hate-filled discourse online created such a negative and toxic atmosphere around the show, and that actually made it hard to have fun and engaging conversations about where the show is actually failing. There was also a lot of toxic discourse around The Acolyte, with some fans review bombing the show on Rotten Tomatoes before it was even released. Now, there were plenty of critiques that could be made about this show without having to get into the mud.
No mudslinging!
I mean, the general audience started dropping off on the show as it went along. I mean, just look at the ratings. They've dipped massively from the premiere on down to the finale, and that's because the show did a horrible job of keeping the audience engaged. This show's failure wasn't because of any of the nonsense that this loud minority was screaming about on Twitter. It was because the show actually had some serious storytelling and pacing issues. The story was told out of order, and we couldn't really connect with the characters because all of their backstories were kept secret to create a feeling of mystery. But the mystery just couldn't sustain the show.
Mysterion is so mysterious.
They had the same storytelling issues with the Book of Boba Fett. The pacing was just all over the place. But if you take The Acolyte and tell the story in order, it's actually really good. Again, it's like the Eternals. So that's just my thoughts. I do think, though, that The Acolyte introduced a lot of really cool story elements that I want to see paid off. Now, I'm going to give my thoughts on how that could happen later on, but first, I want to talk to two of my very favorite people. We have Head of Licensing at IDW, Heather Antos, and Colton Ogburn, who is trapped in a television but doesn't know it, so please don't tell him. And Heather, I know that I got your actual title at IDW wrong. I knew it as soon as I said it. Tell us real quick what you actually do there.
Group editor of licensing.
So
you were close. You were so close.
So close. So tell me, Heather, first off, did you like The Acolyte, and did it deserve to be canceled?
So tough. I like it in theory. I like a lot of elements that they introduced. You know, we've talked heavily about the wire work and the fight scenes we saw throughout. I love getting into this earlier version of the Jedi and you know, seeing Vanessa Rowe like kind of working on her own you know, little projects, and you know, introducing Kalnaka and just all of these elements were so cool and interesting. It's just, the story was so awkward and the pacing was pretty much non-existent. You know, do I think it deserved to get canceled? I'm not surprised. I will say I'm not surprised it got canceled. I think, you know, we've seen other shows with had just as many issues, Book of Boba Fett being a huge one. You know, Ahsoka had a lot of issues as well in its storytelling, but these shows had characters that fans were already invested in. And we talked heavily about that as well too. Acolyte did not give us enough information about these characters to be invested or care about them. And I think that was the show's biggest Achilles heel. You know, if the story wasn't up to snuff, you know, if the pacing wasn't up to snuff, so long as we had characters that we were willing to die for and go to the ends of the earth for, and were invested in and wanted to see more, and viewers could stick out for those characters, I don't think we would be having this conversation today.
I 100% agree. And real quick, where can people find you online? Where do you do your Instas and your Insta?
Oh yeah, at Heather Antos on all the things. Just my
Heather's
name.
a great follow, always posting great art, and you go to conventions and things and meet a lot of cool people. Very great follow on all platforms. Colton, before I move on, I want to talk about like this franchise assumption fatigue thing that's going on. But first, I want to know, we talked about The Acolyte a lot on here. Did you like The Acolyte, and do you think it deserved to be canceled?
Well, you know, contrary to popular belief, I actually had a lot of issues with The Acolyte. Like, for example, I hated episode 4. I think we disagree on that one. But in a thumbs up, thumbs down world, I give The Acolyte a thumbs up. I thought it had a lot of really interesting lore. I appreciated them exploring an area of Star Wars that really has not been explored in the live action. This show, though, all the issues that it had, I just don't understand how the issues this show had were any more glaring than the issues that any other Disney Plus show has. It had all the exact same issues, pacing issues, the way the episodes are ordered, the amount of episodes, the way the story is told, the production itself. All the Disney Plus shows, even the good ones, kind of seem to have this issue. So my only problem is, while I fully acknowledge the issues the show had, I don't know why this one isn't getting a season 2. Like, let's take Ahsoka, for example. That's getting a season 2. I like Ahsoka. It was fine. It had a lot of issues. And if I had to pick which show I liked better, I think I preferred The Acolyte over Ahsoka. Oh, I know I'm going to get attacked.
And I don't
absolutely,
I don't like Ahsoka
100%.
that much either. Yeah.
No, I think it goes back to, like I said, the characters, right? Ahsoka has characters that people are just obsessed with. Book of Boba Fett has characters that people are already invested in, and Acolyte just didn't have those.
And also, Ahsoka is part of the bigger plan. Like, they're setting up the crossover movie and things like that. So that kind of brings. Well, Colton, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, to answer your question, I am disappointed that we're not getting a season 2, especially in a world where other shows are. And I'm not including Andor in that. Andor is absolutely brilliant. It deserves 5 seasons. But I am disappointed that we're not going to see this story continue. And, and we can talk about this here in a second. Maybe the story will continue. Maybe Disney's just making the perhaps wise marketing decision of not calling it The Acolytes. And since it is such a controversial kind of, bogged down in the toxicity of internet discourse and stuff. Now, I will be perfectly fine if they announce a new show that follows the same story. I want to see that Plagueis stuff and whatnot, but maybe don't call it The Acolyte. If that's their plan, I'm all in for that. But if they're just completely abandoning the story, no, I'm very disappointed by that.
Well, one thing I'm looking at The Acolyte, and I thought this when the last episode ended. Anything attached to a franchise needs to stop the arrogance of thinking that they're guaranteed a next season or a sequel, where it's all set up and no story. I'll give you an example, like the Hercules setup at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder, right? Well, they put the tease in there with no intention of when they're actually going to give us that. They took what worked for the MCU in those first that first decade, and then they just sort of assume, oh yeah, we're going to call it Ghost, the new Mission Impossible was part 1, or the Fast X part 1. This season had a terrible ending. I don't blame people for not jumping on board after this ending. I mean, it ends on a cliffhanger. Ahsoka had a terrible ending. They teased all these different things with Baylan Skoll. The Mandalorian, for all the faults people have with season 3, which I think was uneven storytelling, but it told a story. Each season of The Mandalorian told a specific story with a beginning, a middle, and an end that didn't make the fans feel like they were cheated. Ahsoka, if you're going to say the point of it was to bring Ezra back to normal space, fine, but it left so many dangling plot threads and character beats unresolved or unanswered. Just didn't do it for me. Book of Boba Fett, for all its flaws, did give us a pretty satisfying finale where they dumped all the toys out on the floor and played with them at once. Heather, what do you think about this franchise assumption that a sequel will always be coming?
I mean, I'm still waiting on that Sinister Six movie, you guys. I'm still.
Well, they still have to release Craven.
And that's true. That's true. And we are getting that. So
and I mean
the original.
I didn't see the last Craven trailer, but it has something to do with Spider-Man, I think.
Who?
Sorry, I cut you off, Heather.
Who? No. Yeah, I mean, I say this all the time. Tell the story you're telling. Don't tell me the next story. And I just felt like Acolyte this was one of its biggest flaws. We see this in Marvel, the Marvel Disney Plus shows all the time too. They're so focused on teasing what's next, and tying this into the next big thing that we completely lose focus of this story, this current story. And I just, God, I wanted to know what was going on, with the Jedi. I wanted to know, tell me what the High Republic is. I think the Acolyte did such a poor job of telling us what the High Republic is, what makes this era of Jedi, what makes these Jedi so different from prequels, right? We never really got that in this show. It's a lot of, again, like you said, assumption that the viewer is already in the know or really wants it. I mean, hell, even as a last ditch effort, right? Didn't the Acolyte marketing team like start to change all the posters and online stuff to be like Acolyte Chapter 1 or something like that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
To
Yeah.
start to, promote season 2, and all the actors kept going on tours talking about a season 2 and really making it feel like, I guess we're getting it. I mean, Mandy Jacinto is out here talking about season 2 and where he sees his character going and all of these things. And
they canceled it on his birthday.
Well, and Heather, I think you make a really good point about wanting to like learn more about the Jedi during this era and stuff. I mean, what happened to television? Why aren't we getting a 16 to, I don't know, 18, 20 episode season showing, Soul and Osha going on missions when she was a Jedi, and getting to see them do different things, and have the story, the overarching story of her dark side turn and Plagueis and all that be that through line, instead of just going, oh, here's 6 episodes telling the whole story right here. Have some fun, have a TV show with some different arcs and stuff like that. That I think that was their biggest mistake. And that's not just the Acolyte. That's almost every seems every streaming show nowadays, especially
on Disney Plus.
On Disney Plus, yes.
I think, God, just having a Jedi like almost like Law and Order or CS like procedural show, yes, right? Like that would do so well. That's how you introduce a show of Jedi that like no one knows who they are and are invested in, right? Because that's kind of how all of those procedurals, you just have a core group of characters and you fall in love with these characters, and then they have all their different missions or whatever that they do. And God, I think that would just be so cool to just have a half hour, 45-minute, like Jedi procedural drama, and introduce, the heel turn of Osha, or, tease in Plagueis in the background and all of this. God, I want that so bad now.
Imagine when Colton said, give us a TV show. I like in my head, I heard a core, like an old movie in British Parliament. Like I could just hear that in my head, like 100%, man. That's why I was encouraging you along, because I absolutely agree with that. Like, give us a normal TV show. Mm-hmm. And this kind of goes into talking about, the Acolyte's not in a vacuum. You look at the Acolyte, we've already discussed similarities to Ahsoka, but it's also problems that we saw with, what was left of Echo after they got done cutting it, and a lot of like Marvel live action shows. I would say apart from She-Hulk, because She-Hulk actually had self-contained episodes that were like, 9 or 10 episodes long. And
Hawkeye was pretty self-contained too, aside, albeit from a little bit at the end, but Hawkeye was mostly self-contained.
Still felt like it didn't do a lot of setup for future things, like Moon Knight. I'm happy with the ending they gave Moon Knight, because it was the kind of twist that also said, oh, well, that also explains the character throughout the show, and maybe we'll see that go on. But if not, it gave an ending to these characters, right? But Moon Knight and Hawkeye and Falcon and the Winter Soldier all felt like a movie that was cut up. And we know this. Marvel has addressed this problem, or are addressing it, rebranding their Marvel Studios to like Marvel Television, and having traditional showrunners and pilot scripts and running things normally. It seems like this was a Disney Plus edict, though, because the shows, except for The Mandalorian, for some reason, the Star Wars shows seem to have followed the same thing. But even The Mandalorian, the second episode was 30 minutes long. And maybe The Mandalorian, by the time season 3 came along, also suffered from this kind of casting too wide a net, telling a disjointed story. I think I'm wondering if there's a restructuring going on in the way that they create these shows maybe they're going to borrow from, and maybe that's why Acolyte didn't make the cut. Maybe it's a holdover, Heather.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I'd be very curious, because like, look, we all know getting a show greenlit at all is a miracle, right? Whether the concept came from in-house or your producer pitching up, and I'm very curious for some of all of these shows that are tied into everything, if that was part of how you got a show picked up and how you got it greenlit, is you had to like show how it's part of the bigger picture. And so you're kind of forced to do that, which obviously, forcing plot is never how you're going to get a good story.
Yeah. And maybe had the Acolyte forced, just not to, no pun intended, had the Acolyte, not even a pun. Maybe if the Acolyte would have forced more connections to the prequel trilogy. Like, I really think, had they ended the first season with Vanestra Rowe in hyperspace having a prophecy of the balance of the Force, something like that, right? I'm not trying to like fanfic my way into this, but like some sort of deeper connection to the original trilogy. But then again, Colton, they did have connections to the original trilogy, and there's that very small, very loud, very tied into the algorithm segment of fandom that took poor Coyote-Mundy's cameo and just took it as an opportunity to, for some reason, shit on it, because in Wikipedia, it had a different, like from old, it's almost like amateur Star Wars fans coming in. I'm not going to say any names, but like, it's almost like amateur Star Wars fans coming in on Twitter and being like, well, actually, but no, because his Coyote-Mundy's age was established in a Legends novel and Disney wiped away the canon. Why do you care?
Whoa,
and
not
why
even
does
a Legends
anyone
novel. Not even a Legends novel. A damn CD-ROM and a playing card that came out with Phantom Menace.
It wasn't
You're
even.
gonna get me on a rant.
But like no, but even I mean, we talked about this I think on the last episode talk back, right? That scene where it's Vanessa Rowe with the senator and they're talking about the greater issues that, you know, this one senator has with the Jedi and he doesn't trust them and all of these things like that is your tie-in to the prequels right there. That right there, that is your tie-in. And we screamed this during our final talk back that had they put that one scene in the first episode or second episode or wherever it made sense in the opening, had they included that in there, that immediately gives anyone who just has the very base casual viewership of Star Wars a dot to connect to. It immediately gives context, immediately gives stakes, immediately tells us how this show could possibly tie in and impact future canon or stories that we know, and makes it matter. This story didn't matter.
I did admire, I'll say it's a great writer's room that Leslie Headland put together too, like some really accomplished playwrights and other people from television. I do admire them for taking a big swing. You know, she said in interviews they were doing this Rashomon thing. They wanted to show things from a different point of view. It was a murder mystery. Kind of clear nobody in the writer's room ever really wrote a murder mystery before. Or if they had, then they phoned it in on this one because the mystery was solved in one episode. And as far as the Rashomon thing, that only works if we're sold on one person's point of view early on, which we really weren't. We always knew there was some other revelation that was going to happen. But they took a swing. They tried a different structure. It really didn't work, though. Maybe because it again felt random that they cut it up in random places. But there were certain fans who never even gave the show a chance. And I personally always feel like I'm put on the back foot when this happens. Same thing happened with Rings of Power. They released images of the characters and immediately fans hit the algorithm because it was controversial, talking about, well, Tolkien never intended for there to be people of color and things like that. And like the rest of us are going, just cast good actors. It can be colorblind casting. It doesn't matter. It's fantasy. It's Star Wars. It's really fine. So I was always put in a position where I felt the need to either just not respond or to defend. But I don't think that reaction has anything to do with the cancellation, though, like we talked about earlier. But still, it did place the show in this like awkward spot where the loudest voices driven by the algorithm were the ones seemingly hating it. I mean, Heather, do you think, or Colton, whoever wants to take it, like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you know, for a good chunk, Acolyte was the #1 streaming show on Disney Plus. That didn't go through, right? Obviously, if it stayed #1, we wouldn't be here. So by the end, you know, people weren't really tuning in for the finale, but the first couple of weeks, like it was popping. And so, you know, I don't think those voices had anything to do with it. I think the show just wasn't what people wanted. And that shows in the viewership, unfortunately.
Colton, what do you think?
I genuinely
Colton's on the bench like this. Put me in, coach. Put me in, coach. Put me in, coach.
I genuinely hope that they have nothing to do with it, and I seriously doubt they do. I don't know why Disney would lend any credence to these dorks, but I just have to say, this show brought out and finally just revealed to me that part of this fandom, and not just Star Wars fandom, just fandom in general, consists of some of the whiniest people I believe I have ever encountered in my life. And it always shocked me. And I don't know why. You would think as long as I've been in this, I would be used to it. But it was just genuinely surprising how whiny a large portion of this audience is, and how they would attack certain things. Like, yes, there's the whole, they called it woke, and oh god, oh my god, they cast a person of color, and they freak out about that. But then they would also complain about things like the Kieti Mundi thing, or they'd say, oh, it's breaking canon, it's breaking lore. No, there's not a single thing, and I will argue this till the end, to the ends, that there is not a single thing in the Acolyte that breaks any Star Wars canon whatsoever. They fully established, even before Disney took over, there was G-level canon, and that was the canon. Everything under that could be changed. So I don't want to hear, oh, Disney doesn't know what they're doing, blah, blah. They changed Qui-Gon's age. Nobody freaked out over that. George changed canon all the time, but really it wasn't even changing canon because it was his canon. It was called G canon. And that's what it was. Sorry, I know I'm kind of going off, but I feel like this show was so unfairly treated. There was so much material there to actually critique about this show, but these knuckle draggers could not be bothered to actually even watch the show and critique it on that basis. No, they had to complain about, oh my god, Kitty Mundy's birthday's wrong. Oh my god, there's a gay witch. It's just so infuriating. And so
as we've said, there was a lot to not like about the show. You're 100% right. They focused on the wrong things.
I'll stop. It's just so frustrating.
All right.
It's just so frustrating.
Give you free reign, but I know it's a cesspool. When you start to circle down that, it's really hard to stop. Again, though, I kind of just disconnect from all that. Like, I know it's just part of what we do. There's always going to be people who don't even mean what they say, but they focus in on it. But you're right. There is nothing in this show that broke canon in any way. Like, it established canon. In fact, Leslie Headland, I feel a little bad for her because she's a massive Star Wars fan. Heather, she was bringing things in from canon that were very deep cuts, things I had never heard of. I mean, things on the level of like how in the next season of Ahsoka, we're going to get like the mother from the Mortis gods, who's this monster that was like, she was bringing in cortosis and all this other stuff that like very deep cuts that seamlessly fit into the universe she was building. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, man, if they would have given you like a movie on Disney Plus or more episodes, I still am baffled by the budget and how cheap the show looked at points, but I don't want to go down that road again. We talked about that a lot during the season. But Heather, speaking of canon, you're an expert in this. Everything's canon until it's not. Am I wrong?
That's correct. I mean, I say it all the time. It's an old comics mantra that we have. That's how we get to keep telling new stories with these characters time and time again. Obviously, no one goes out to intentionally break canon. But at the end of the day, and I know a lot of y'all are going to yell at me for this in the comments, but these stories aren't real. They're just stories, I know.
It is hard for me to hear that, though, because part of what makes this work and makes the comics work is that we know it's not real. But with Marvel Comics, for example, you really feel like I felt like for years, like that's a long story that's being told,
or
like soap operas feel the same way. It's this connection that we have to it emotionally. And I think, like, for me, Rise of Skywalker was my jumping off point because I could see the puppet strings. For some people, it was Last Jedi. For some people, it was Phantom Menace or The Empire Strikes Back. Like everyone's kind of got their own point when they go, oh, all right, so this is a corporation doing these things. So what I was meant to say earlier is I think Leslie Headland gets Star Wars. I'm not sure Disney 100% gets Star Wars. I think they just want the money.
Disney gets money. I was going to say Disney gets money, and they understand that Star Wars gets the money.
This reminds me of another Star Wars project that set up a sequel that we'll never get, Solo. And a lot of what they set up in Solo was resolved in the Crimson Empire comics that took place between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. Kira came back. Between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Kira came back. We saw what happened to Crimson Dawn under her leadership. Of course, we already know what happened to Darth Maul. So there's still some gaps in the canon story to fill in there. And I just want to say, I love what Disney does with the Star Wars canon. I love that everything connects and it's organic in a lot of ways. Sometimes maybe not as organic, but I think it's a lot of fun. So we did end up getting to see the story resolved in the comics. Now I'm wondering, of Solo resolved in the comics, now I'm wondering, when will this get resolved? There's some big stuff that's set up, some really fun payoffs. Heather, do you think it's going to be in a novel, a comic? Do you think they'll bother? Based on your insider opinion.
They better bother.
Yeah.
I hope they bother. Damn right. Some good stuff.
Yeah, I know. When are we gonna find out who that guy in that cave was in that last episode?
Colton,
Really
who
weird.
was the guy in the cave?
Really weird.
Who was it? Yeah. I love that you had that holster next to you. Colton just held up the Darth Plagueis the Wise novel.
Yeah, I actually have a holster for it here on my belt. Yeah, I just keep it at all times. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, there's definitely room for comics to tie stuff in and tell that story. There's for sure room in the novels to do something like that. I can definitely see, for me personally, my personal taste, I think this would suit better in novels than comics, just because there's so many different points of view and characters involved, and a lot of story I think left to be told. But again, who knows? Like, I feel like you don't just like throw Plagueis on screen without plans to do more with Plagueis on screen. So yeah, I wonder, like you said earlier, the opportunity to have another show or movie or something that's just not called Acolyte. Give me a Darth Plagueis show. I don't know.
Yeah. Or, I mean, look, man, they set up so much. It's just like, again, in the wrong order. I'm going to sound like a broken record if I keep going here. Colton, what do you think? Where could we see this? I agree with Heather. I think a novel is the best venue for this, because in the Acolyte, there's a lot of internal monologue. There's a lot of like placing yourself in character shoes. I think it'd be a natural fit. Colton, where do you hope we get to see this again? If it's not a streaming series on Disney Plus, be wild if it was a movie.
To quote Deadpool, I do not read. So no, I'm just kidding. I really don't read a lot of fiction. I am more of a nonfiction reader. Anyway, I think Star Wars is a visual medium. I am all for having the novels. I really am. But I think that this saga, it's a movie franchise first, and the series as well. I want to see these stories told on screen. I think that's where Star Wars is best served. Again, the novels are great. I want to have novels that explore. I wish they would explore things that maybe don't even necessarily have to be canon, just cool stories that they could explore. I think novels serve as a good they're a good addition. But for the story itself, when you are introducing something like the origins of the Chosen One, the origins of Anakin Skywalker, Virgences in the Force, Darth Plagueis, I want to see that told on screen. So I do hope we get like maybe a Plagueis series that explores like the Knights of Ren stuff with Chimere. Maybe we see a young Palpatine. That's something that I've wanted to see for a long time. I think it's there. Maybe don't call it the Acolyte. You can call it the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise or something. Maybe that's a little long. But yeah, I hope to see this story told in a visual medium, because a novel would be great. I'd certainly read it, but most people won't, and most people don't have the time, or it's just not their thing.
Audiobooks are good too. Some of the best Star Wars since 2015 has been the comics and novels, and we're lucky to have one of the people who created that with us here today. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. As always, everybody watching, we want to hear from you. Be respectful. We want to hear from you what you really think of the Acolyte down in the comments. Like, do you think that the show deserved another season, that deserved to be canceled? And you can find all of our social links below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. Big thanks to Heather Antos and Colton Ogburn for joining me. You can shout out them to their socials as well. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.